On the basketball court, two boys stood opposite each other. One of them held a basketball in his hand and bent his knees in a tense attacking stance. The good-looking eyes stared at the person on the opposite side, and after a while, he smiled with his lips hooked. "Huangfu Aotian, admit defeat, you can't beat me." When the words fell, the girls' onlookers couldn't help but let out deafening screams. "Ah! Young Master Gu is so handsome! So manly! Young Master Huangfu is so handsome! He looks so handsome that he doesn't speak with a cold face." The girls who watched and cheered were divided into two groups. One group was screaming and cheering, while the other group was naturally not far behind, and also shouted, whose voice was louder than the other. The two people standing in the center of the stadium were not paying attention for a while. Huangfu Aotian frowned, and his eyes were filled with disgust. "You are so arrogant when you just turned around, don't you know whose territory is here?" Gu Pan raised his eyebrows, smiling brightly and arrogantly. "That was before, and after today, Sensia will be my territory." "Are the lines handsome?" "Undoubtedly, he must be handsome." Especially at the moment when he said it, Gu Pan really felt that he was so handsome. Apart from the fact that every time I hear Huangfu Aotian's earthy and Mary Sue name, I can't help but want to laugh. Gu Pan felt that her performance today was perfect. It's just that the next thing is a bit miserable. According to the script, Gu Pan, the poor second male lead, will inevitably be crushed to ashes when he meets the male lead. How happy he was when he said harsh words, the more miserable he was abused. Final score, 16-1. Aotian said that it was easy to win, and looked at the cloudless blue sky very arrogantly. His expression was not the joy of victory, but a kind of loneliness that he could not find his opponent. In the end, she drifted away amid the cheers of her fans. But she only got 1 point, which the referee really couldn't bear. Gu Pan, who made an exception to give her a friendship point, sat directly on the ground after the referee announced the result because of the amount of exercise that exceeded her physical fitness. With one leg bent, his arm resting lazily on his knee, he lowered his head slightly, and fine beads of sweat slowly dripped down his chin, as if he had lost the game. The fans were very distressed when they saw it, and they all gathered around to comfort them. It doesn't matter what game they lost, it doesn't matter if they lost, they will always love young Master Gu the most. Instead, Gu Pan was so annoyed that he wanted to hit someone. At this time, a voice sounded in my mind at the right time, and the mechanical voice reminded me without the slightest emotion, the tasker can't collapse the character design, otherwise the world will collapse, and the tasker will die without a place to be buried. Gu Pan. I haven't collapsed. I'm not patient. Why, I can't even think about it. Gu Pan is really fed up, he threatens her with death without a burial at every turn, but, not to mention, it's really effective, after all, who can't get along with himself, who can't think of going to die if he's living well. Gu Pan thought about his personality passing through thousands of flowers, no leaves touching his body, and finally fell in love with the heroine, an infatuated second male who was willing to change his mind for the heroine. There is another nickname, people give a nickname, the friend of women. In my heart, I cursed the pervert of the character, but I had to hold back a smile on my face, looked up at the worried fans next to me, wiped the sweat from my chin very handsomely. I'm sorry, let you guys disappointed, if I were better, I would definitely win today. Strange. She doesn't even know how to play basketball. She can't stand on the court because she is handsome. The fans are only interested in admiring her appearance. Who would have noticed how their beloved young Master Gu was hanged, beaten, and tortured? No, no. Young Master Gu is the most powerful. Master Gu will always be the best in our hearts. We don't need to compare with others. Gu Pan was enjoying the praise of the fans with peace of mind. After a while, he stood up from the ground with his arms up, picked up the school uniform that had just been taken off the ground and put it on his shoulders, and winked at a group of little girls. Yan, I'm going to the cafeteria now, Do you want to go together? It is definitely necessary. After coming here for so many days, I don't have any special experience, so I feel the feeling of being a star like a star. No wonder everyone in her world likes to be a star. Not to mention, this feeling is really cool. That's right, Gu Pan is an honorable traveler, but the place she travels through is a bit special. It's in a novel, and it's the very hated Mary Sue novel. Gu Pan's current identity is the second infatuated man in this Mary Sue novel. Thinking that she had just digested the matter of her wearing a book, and was told by the system that she was dressed as the second male, a man. Gu Pan groped around on his body in horror, and finally found out that there were no parts suddenly added or missing, and he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Gu Pan's height was average in Mary Sue's world, which was always 1.9 meters, and even a little awkward, only 1.72 meters. However, her face made up for this shortcoming very well. The innocent appearance of a teenager, the peach blossom eyes were even more charming when she smiled, and even her fans were tolerant of her a lot. Hey, young Master Gu has just entered high school this year, he is only 16 years old, and he will definitely grow taller in the future, but that face is not for everyone. In such a comparison, what is the height? Sure enough, no matter what world you are in, the face is a big killer. Gu Pan walked in the direction of the restaurant, followed by a large group of fans. This posture is like a star going out of the street, there are lines. Passers-by were a little surprised when they saw such a long line, and then saw Gu Pan walking at the front, and they understood it instantly. Master Gu! The girls covered their mouths and screamed while sighing, what's going on? How could young Master Gu walk alone on campus? It is true that the Gu family, one of the major nobles in the Mary Sue world, has privileges wherever he goes. For example, he has his own private car in the school, his own exclusive restaurant, and, if he wants, his own exclusive classroom. It's just so unreasonable. At this moment, Gu Pan was walking alone on the road, and looking at the direction she was walking. It turned out to be a public restaurant. Gu Pan took the risk of being surrounded by crowds. Instead of going to her own restaurant, she went to the public restaurant with the most people. Did she suddenly want to open it up to see the people's feelings? Still feel tired of private dining rooms and suddenly want to change your taste? Neither. The reason was that the system threatened her with that cold mechanical voice. The mission target appears in the public restaurant, and the missionary must approach the mission target within a day, otherwise the world will collapse and the missionary will die without a place to be buried. Stop, stop! Gu Pan interrupted impatiently, is it so special now? If a task is not completed, it will collapse for me? Will it not make people feel better, right? The system pretended not to speak. Gu Pan is also used to it, anyway, as long as that thing threatens her, it's not a good thing. She really wanted to pet her and leave, to go to his task. What could she do if she couldn't? The reality is very skinny. If you don't do it, you will die, and people have no choice at all. Gu Pan, as one of the most influential figures in Sunsia High School, has always been a fangirl. Even though she just transferred to this school not long ago, the reputation of Little Master Gu has long been known to everyone. With that face that fascinated people and didn't pay for his life, after transferring to another school, he successfully snatched a lot of fans who originally belonged to Huangfuaotian. At this moment, their young Master Gu came to the public dining room of ordinary people, ignoring everyone's surprised or excited eyes, and walked straight to a corner. Sunsia is an aristocratic school. Even if the people here are ordinary, they are all children of rich families, otherwise they can't even pay the tuition. Gu Pan walked towards a corner according to the positioning given by the system, but the person sitting there surprised Gu Pan. Among the group of people dressed in fancy clothes and showing Mary Sue's temperament, only the teenager wore a white and clean shirt, and his hair was naturally black. Compared with those who liked to dye their hair colorful, it was not too pleasing to the eye. Although Gu Pan's current body also follows Mary Sue's aesthetics, but fortunately, she only highlighted a few strands of grumpy grandma's grey, which is not too exaggerated. In Gu Pan's cognition, it is normal for a teenager to dress like this, but in the eyes of other people in this world, it becomes shabby. Everyone likes to exclude people who do not belong to the same world as themselves, and the teenager is obviously the one who is excluded. Said to be a teenager, but in fact he looked much taller than Gu Pan, just sitting in a chair, temporarily unable to see the difference. The people next to him did not expect that young Master Gu condescended to walk over just to see such a civilian. Seeing young Master Gu staring at the commoner intently, some people couldn't help but start to speculate. Did this person provoke young Master Gu? Otherwise, why would young Master Gu come all the way to seek revenge? Definitely. You look at young Master Gu with anger burning in your eyes. This is the first time I have seen young Master Gu so angry. Then this commoner is miserable, he dares to provoke young Master Gu. The speaker's voice was not too loud or too small, just enough to reach everyone's ears. Gu Pan. Which I saw her angry. That is obviously a curious look. And compliments on his dressing style. Understand. Gu Pan rolled his eyes in his heart, and also roughly understood the situation of the boy in Sensia. Not too good. It may not be the first time that he has been ostracized. Even though he was surrounded by so many people, the young man still sat in his seat to eat quietly, never even raising his head from beginning to end, as if he could not hear the arguments next to him. Gu Pan couldn't help feeling a little sympathy for the young man, so he thought that the system asked her to come here because the young man in front of him was the mission target in the system's mouth, and he hurriedly asked the system for the identity of the young man and what the mission was. The system is still a cold mechanical voice. The name of the mission target is Zhang Xuan, whose background is temporarily locked, and can only be unlocked after the mission person completes a certain mission. This task, let Zhang Xuan graduate smoothly. Gu Pan. What did you say his name was? This time, the system didn't pretend to be dead, so he kindly repeated it, Zhang Xuan. Gu Pan didn't give up, and continued to ask, how many people named Zhang Xuan in this world? In the setting of this world, no one's name will be repeated. In other words, it is impossible to have duplicate names. Even if there is, it is probably just a passerby. Anyway, as long as the characters appearing in the plot, one person is one pit, and the right number is seated. Gu Pan's sympathy instantly disappeared without a trace. When Gu Pan was reading this novel in her world, she always had a question. Everyone else's names are full of Mary Sue's temperament, like Huangfu XX, Murong XX, Uyang, and so on. Only the second male number has a special name, which is her current identity. The surname is Gu, which can be described as a clear stream in the Mary Sue world. It was only after I walked through it that I learned that the Gu family was indeed a civilian at first, and then gradually developed into a medical family. In the generation of Gu Pan, the Gu family almost took over the medical institutions in the whole world. As long as you are human, you will be afraid of life, old age, sickness, and death, and Mary Sue's world is no exception. All the top doctors in the world came from the Gu family, which also established the Gu family's irreplaceable aristocratic status, and even faintly qualified to compete with the first aristocratic Huangfu family. As the only child of the Gu family's generation, Gu Pan's status has also risen with the tide, becoming the top 2 girl in the world's most wanted to marry list. The first is Huangfu Aotian. Apart from the special noble of the Gu family, there was only one person who impressed Gu Pan deeply. That is the ultimate villain in the novel, and also the hidden boss, Zhang Xuan. Unlike the Gu family, a noble who came from behind, Zhang Xuan was a downright commoner, and because of this status, he was often rejected by others. Gu Pan still remembers that he seemed to have been slandered and dropped out of school in the 3rd year of high school. Later, after he counterattacked and became the villain, he didn't know whether it was blackened or what, but he was avenging everyone in this world. At the end of the novel, Aotian, a classmate with the aura of the male protagonist of Mary Sue, came down from the sky, saved the whole world as a savior, and lived happily with the female protagonist. Gu Pan couldn't help shaking her legs when she thought that she was about to approach such a character. At this time, the threat of the curse of the system death without a burial place appeared in Gu Pan's mind again in a timely manner, asking her to prepare the action of turning around and running stopped in place, and had to choose to face the next tragedy. This, classmate. The classmate didn't raise his head, he didn't even bother to look forward to it. Gu Pan is not angry either, big boss, you must have a good temper and a face. She looked around at the melon-eating crowd with different expressions, and carefully recalled the negligible character description of Jiang Sun in the original work, as well as the cruel fact that the big guy finally destroyed the world after blackening. I deeply feel that even if Jiang Sun is still a teenager now, his temper will not be very good. Maybe the boss thinks that her posture is here to find fault? While Gu Pan was dealing with the cold threat of the system, he secretly hoped to find a thick thigh to hold him. Aotian definitely can't do it. Let's not say that this person is not born with himself. The hostile position of the Huangfu family and the Gu family for decades. From a personal level, the two of them are still rivals in love, why should they not stand on the same line? On the battle line. After thinking about it, only Jiang Sun, the future boss, is the best candidate. You all go to dinner first, Gu Pan said gently, this classmate and I have a little private matter to deal with. Everyone was stunned for 2 seconds, then they thought they had suddenly realized, oh, and left obediently. It's just that not many people actually left the restaurant, but they quickly queued up to buy food and then found a seat closest to this corner and sat down. Jiang Sun had probably been ostracized for a long time, so he naturally found the most remote corner of the entire restaurant, so that the students who wanted to sit closer and listen to a few conversations between Master Gu and this commoner couldn't hear it. No one would think that Gu Pan really came to Jiang Sun to discuss the so-called private affairs, but they more and more confirmed their previous guess, this commoner must have offended Master Gu. With the power of the Gu family, young Master Gu has the character of revenge, so this commoner will definitely not be able to stay in the school this afternoon. All right. In the eyes of the classmates, young Master Gu, who is invincible day by day, is a little restless at this moment. When he was talking just now, he took the opportunity to sit next to Jiang Sun. He didn't feel anything at first. After the others left, Gu Pan felt an obvious coolness emanating from his side. Gu Pan turned his head stiffly, but saw that Jiang Sun didn't seem to be affected in the slightest, and he was still eating slowly, without even raising his head from beginning to end. What a good concentration this must be! Truly a big man. Gu Pan was thinking about how to speak. The task given to her by the system was to help Jiang Sun graduate smoothly. Not to mention how difficult it is to complete, it is not easy to win the trust of the boss now. What's more, from Gu Pan's point of view, Jiang Sun didn't drive her away, but just ignored her, as can be seen from the coldness radiating from him. Gu Pan dawdled for a while, and finally had the courage to say a word, but Jiang Sun suddenly got up and walked away with a dinner plate. Never looking back. Gu Pan. In the original work, Gu Pan, this young master who is doted on by thousands, although he is very gentle towards girls with a gentleman's heart, can treat people of the same sex, especially those who have a competitive relationship with him, more than a ruthless can be described. Just like Jiang Sun, if it was Gu Pan in the original work, he would definitely beat him to the ground. Even if Jiang Sun's military strength is high, Gu Pan might not be able to beat him, but with the power of the Gu family, it is enough to make him go away. Now that this shell has changed its soul, Gu Pan, who had always felt that many of the original owner's actions were inappropriate, had the same heart for the first time. I wanted to beat this guy hard. Even if he will be awesome in the future, that's not the reason why he looks at people with his nostrils now. No wonder it is so hated. The annual drama that the melon eaters had been waiting for was not staged, but it was not long before the commoner left as if nothing had happened. Instead, their honorable young Master Gu sat there for a while, and when he left obviously not in a good mood. Everyone looked at each other and suddenly realized. Look, the two are indeed in conflict. Gu Pan was so angry that he forgot to go to his private dining room to eat, and went straight back to the classroom. As a distinguished person on the first step in the world, the location of the classroom is of course different from other students. In a single building, there are actually only a dozen people in a space several times larger than a normal classroom. Gu Pan found his classroom according to the system's cold navigation, and was really taken aback. I don't know where I thought that I entered the villa, and its splendid appearance did not have the solemnity that a classroom should have. Gu Pan was too lazy to sigh that the people here were out of their minds, so he found a sofa and leaned back, closing his eyes and resting. It didn't take long for people to enter this classroom one after another. Gu Pan opened his eyes lazily and looked at them. There were two girls, one with pink hair and the other with green hair. After seeing all kinds of messy hair colors in the school, Gu Pan can now see the person with a layer of green on the top of his head. But after careful recall, the description of the heroine in the original work seems to be green hair. Gu Pan whispered, the author's bad taste. The pink-haired girl was also taken aback when she saw Gu Pan in the classroom. She reflexively looked at the person next to her, and said in a low voice, Lian Lian, it's Master Gu. The girl called Lian Lian didn't say anything, her eyes flickered, and she turned to the other side. The pink-haired girl glanced at Gu Pan with a lazy expression again, and couldn't help sighing in her heart. Young Master Gu is handsome and has a noble family background. He didn't expect to be so affectionate. He would rather not eat and wait for Lian Lian in the classroom. Even if he can't get the person he loves the most, he must always keep an eye on her. It's a pity that Lian Lian and young Master Huangfu are the engaged fiancés, and young Master Gu will end up paying by mistake. Oh, it's really distressing. 5 minutes later, Huangfu Aotian also entered the classroom. The first thing he saw was Gu Pan leaning on the sofa, and he frowned in disgust. Usually, he doesn't pay too much attention to this guy who pesters his fiancée, and he should go to the other side to find Qing Lian without looking back. But today, for some unknown reason, he walked uncontrollably in front of Gu Pan. What are you doing here? Gu Pan heard the words, looked around, and determined that she and Huangfu Aotian were the only people in this position, so, did classmate Aotian take the initiative to greet her? Without waiting for Gu Pan to think about Aotian's purpose, Huangfu Aotian continued, could it be that you are still coveting Qing Lian? Damn it, Qing Lian is my young master's woman, how dare you? Gu Pan was stunned by the aura of the domineering president coming towards him, and his whole body was sluggish. Is this the legendary tyrant's quotations? Sure enough, seeing 100 things is better than seeing them at first sight, and only after I have truly experienced them did I realize how mentally retarded they are. Which of your eyes did you see me coveting that lotus? My young master is now devoted to Buddhahood and just wants to study hard. As for dating or something, it's just a mediocre idea. Gu Pan's expression was indifferent, coupled with a deep tone. It really sounded like an expert outside the world. Obviously Huangfu Aotian did not expect Gu Pan to say such a thing, and was a little sluggish for a while. After a long while, it was quite difficult to say, you, study. As if hearing something incredible, Huangfu Aotian's eyes were full of disbelief, but Gu Pan's expression was so serious that he couldn't tell whether she was just talking or whether she really had this plan. If it is real. Huangfu Aotian thought about looking forward to the appalling results, and fell silent. Although the two of them are destined to be the old enemies of the king without seeing the king, but now his opponents are so ignorant. No, he has to show the respect he deserves when he is so frustrated and brave. So Aotian looked at Gu Pan with admiration as if he had been pointed out, returned to his position, and continued to work hard. Gu Pan was inexplicable. He searched for his place, and barely found a book from the corner. A line of striking headlines on the home page, ranking of the most popular students of the Royal Academy of Nobles of Cincia. Boys on the left, girls on the right. Unsurprisingly, I saw my name on the second row from the left, but Gu Pan has read this book over and over countless times. Sure, this is the textbook of the legendary noble class of Cincia? Of course not. It's still the cold system sound, but compared to before, this time the system is obviously warmer, at least it has a human touch, and I know it kindly reminds Gu Pan. The system is still too lazy to talk nonsense so much, and directly throws out a long piece of information in front of Gu Pan. Even though the young master of the Gu family is excellent in all aspects, in fact, the crazy fans are confused by her face, and they subconsciously ignore the fact that their young master Gu is actually an out-and-out scumbag. Gu Pan's achievements can only be described in 2 words: appalling. The textbooks issued by the school have been lost since the first day of school. As for the book that I just dug out, which I barely called a fashion magazine, it was also a reading material that Gu Pan used to pass the time during class on weekdays. Until now, Gu Pan finally understood what happened to the deep surprise and pity in the eyes of classmate Aotian who looked at her before she left. Since the big talk has been released, Gu Pan has indeed never been counseled about learning, but the biggest problem facing her now is that there are no textbooks. She also has no way of knowing what level of knowledge in this world's high schools is. Gu Pan thought for a while, stood up, and walked out of the classroom. Tong, find out where Zhongxuan's classroom is. The system really wanted to correct Gu Pan's apparently indecent title, but it didn't know where to start, so it had to give up. Go downstairs, turn right, and walk straight for 200 meters. This is the shortest and oldest building. The place the system said was also easier to find. Gu Pan raised his head and glanced at the so-called shortest and oldest teaching building, but it coincided with Gu Pan's impression of what a school should look like. Going inside, the classroom is as Gu Pan remembered it. There are more than 40 students sitting in a classroom of 50 to 60 square meters. Most of the students here are commoners in the eyes of the nobles, but from Gu Pan's point of view, they are probably the most normal in the whole world. For them, it may be very applicable to the sentence, studying hard is the best way out. Zhongxuan's classroom was at the innermost position on the first floor. It was still lunchtime, and there were not many people in the classroom. Early in the morning, Gu Pan saw Zhongxuan sitting in the back row with his head down and writing something. There is no way, even if this person wears the simplest clothes, he can become the focus of attention while sitting there. Gu Pan temporarily calls it the halo that comes with the villain. Gu Pan quietly walked in through the back door, and a few students sat boredly chatting together, and did not notice Gu Pan. It was also convenient for her, so she walked over and sat next to Zhongxuan. Exactly the same as when he was in the restaurant. Zhongxuan, however, had already noticed her existence when Gu Pan stood at the window and looked in. Zhongxuan is not ignorant of this young master Gu, who has become famous in the school. In his opinion, these so-called nobles are just playing tricks on them for fun. In the restaurant, he made Gu Pan make a fool of himself in public, and with young Master Gu's revenge temper, he would definitely not let him go so easily. Zhongxuan had already expected these. He is not afraid of retribution. After all, who can be sure that nobles are nobles all the time, and commoners are commoners in this life? Not to mention this so-called class distinction, in Zhongxuan's eyes, it's almost like a joke. Zhongxuan sneered in his heart. His slightly lowered eyebrows were as unfathomable as a black vortex. With a smile on his face, young Master Gu took a seat next to Zhongxuan under the eyes of others watching the show. Just like the rumors in the school that young Master Gu acts domineering. Gu Pan was stunned when he lowered his head. Your word. Zhongxuan calmly put the books on the table to the side, and even moved the whole person to distance himself from Gu Pan. The words are so ugly that they stain young Master Gu's eyes. This seems to be the first time Gu Pan has heard him speak to him after he approached Zhongxuan after receiving the mission. As expected of the villain who covers the sky with only one hand in the book, even his voice is so lethal. Listen, it's supposed to be a cool and pleasant tone, but why is it so heart-wrenching when you say it? Whether it's here or in her world, this good handwriting is the most beautiful character Gu Pan has ever seen. She doesn't know much about appreciation, but she also finds it pleasing to the eye. In his mouth, it became too ugly. Gu Pan almost couldn't help but applaud. Is this the big guy? He pretends to be so unique. After being interrupted like this, Gu Pan's feeling that his handwriting was a little familiar just now faded away unconsciously. After all, she came here for another purpose. Zhang, classmate, actually, I'm here for a little favor and want you to help me. Zhang Sun's face was cold, and he calmly met Gu Pan's eyes. These eyes are called peach blossom eyes that make people fall into it at a glance by countless fans. Next, the heartbeat couldn't help but skip a beat. That's right, can I borrow your first-year textbook? Gu Pan's voice was not too small, and the classroom was already quiet, so the students sitting in the front row naturally heard Gu Pan's words. What did Master Gu just say? Borrow textbooks? No one in the school knew that since young Master Gu entered the school, he has been occupying the throne of the last one. What's going on today? The sun is coming out from the west. Zhang Sun obviously didn't expect it, a flash of surprise flashed in his eyes, and he quickly regained his calm. His mouth moved slightly, and the words he said showed no mercy at all, no loan. Gu Pan. This young master has only realized the importance of learning these days. Gu Pan sighed as if he hadn't heard Zhang Sun's words, and continued to speak boldly. I heard that Zhang has been in Sunxia for so many years, and has always been a grader. Number 1, by coincidence, I am also number 1. Gu Pan gave full play to his always cheeky advantage, and didn't care at all how unbelievable the people around her looked at her after she said it, and then flickered. Let's talk to the first place, it's a good talk to talk about it. Come on, classmate Zhang, don't you think so? A positive number is first, and a penultimate number is first. The difference between them is not a star and a half. Zhang Sun obviously didn't expect Gu Pan to be able to talk nonsense with his eyes open so much, and he was a little speechless for a while. Oh, you should help. Gu Pan got closer, and he didn't have the so-called shelf as the young master of the Gu family. In fact, her identity is quite useful. If it was someone else, she would definitely be in a hurry to lend her books. But who is in front of her now? Big villain. The kind that destroys the world with a single word. Gu Pan really didn't want to have a conflict with this big boss. If it wasn't for this convulsive system that insisted on her approaching Zhang Sun, I'm afraid she would have been hiding far away. It's not that I think I've lived a long time. Everyone was shocked by young Master Gu's coquettish tone. Not to mention, young Master Gu's appearance belongs to the delicate category, sitting next to Zhang Sun, who has a cold temperament, if you ignore gender. Bah! How can you think of young Master Gu like this? It's really outrageous. But Zhang Sun was unusually calm, and he held one attitude from beginning to end, don't borrow. Gu Pan glared at Zhang Sun angrily, gritted his teeth, yes, you really can. From this teaching building to Gu Pan's classroom, the distance between them is quite long, plus Gu Pan deliberately dawdled, and when he went back, the class was half finished. Gu Pan shouted report shyly, sitting back in his seat without waiting for the teacher to speak. This is also because Gu Pan has long understood that his treatment in the class is almost the type that teachers of all subjects can't control, and he is too lazy to make trouble for himself. So Gu Pan should eat and sleep in class, which is more free than at home. It's just that I wasn't very lucky this time, and the one I met happened to be a physics teacher with a very bad temper. That's right, even in Mary Sue's world, there are several courses in the college entrance examination, and the content is not bad. Among them, physical chemistry is still the most hated. Speaking of physics teachers, I have to mention Aotian from their class. This Shuewei bald, middle-aged, fat man with only a few clumps of red hair spreading from the Mediterranean Sea is the uncle of Aotian. Gu Pan took a few short steps back to her seat, and she could feel that the mixture of Killer Matt and Mary Sue glared at her dozens of times. Gu Pan's face is serious, but his heart is grief-stricken. Sure enough, time is a butcher's knife. The two big killers, fat and bald, appeared in one person at the same time. Even if this person was terribly handsome when he was young, now it looks only scary. Not to mention the sparse strands of hair, which are still red. Not to mention the hot eyes. However, this also proves how bad the physics teacher's mood is at this moment. According to the family skill of changing hair color according to the mood passed down by the Huangfu family, the bright red color represents a sign of fire that is about to explode. I have to say that this skill is not only useless, on the contrary, it is easy to reveal the true thoughts of the heart. When talking about business, wouldn't the other party just make a guess? I don't know how the Huangfu family has accumulated such a large foundation. Sure enough, the aura of the male protagonist is invincible. Probably because Gu Pan's eyes were too unscrupulous. The physics teacher finally couldn't bear it anymore. Gu Pan, stand up for me. A roar full of anger seemed to bring Gu Pan back to the terrifying period when he was named by the teacher during school. Under the conditioned reflex, he really stood up. The physics teacher was ready to seize the opportunity to let Gu Pan get out and stand, but he didn't expect Gu Pan to be so obedient and really stood up. It's a little embarrassing that I can't breathe. You tell everyone this paper from beginning to end. Gu Pan entered the classroom halfway through, but she didn't listen to her, not to mention her original grades. Isn't this Chi Kuo's embarrassment? Gu Pan ignored the sympathetic eyes of others and walked to the physics teacher step by step with an innocent smile on his face. Okay teacher, then I'll borrow your paper for use first. Mine. I don't know where it went, I can't find it. Physics teacher. It's the first time I've seen the papers thrown away so naturally. Just borrowing a paper, even if there is a correct answer on it, but the topic is to clearly explain the process, and then see what Gu Pan will do. It's a pity that Gu Pan has her own way of thinking about the topic, so it is a matter of course that things did not develop in the direction that the physics teacher thought. Gu Pan simply didn't go back, stood directly next to the physics teacher, spread out the papers, and cleared his throat. Everyone, look at the first question, is there anyone who doesn't know this question? Said, Gu Pan raised his head and glanced at the other students. Everyone hadn't reacted yet. Gu Pan was so submissive, but he was honest and obedient. He was caught off guard when he heard her question, but of course they couldn't react. No, right? I also think this question is too easy to talk about. Okay, then let's go over it and look at the next question. Is this so sloppy? And this second question, how many times have I said it in class, and I repeat it all day long, and I shouldn't make a mistake in this question if my brain is kicked by a donkey. Gu Pan shook his head sadly, and then came to a conclusion, whoever is wrong on this question, go down and copy it for me 100 times. Bring some ideas for solving the problem. Really, Gu Pan rolled his eyes, if you don't worry about it every day, if you don't get the points you deserve, you will all feel ashamed when you go back to inherit the family property in the future. Get out of here. Get out. Without waiting for Gu Pan to continue with the third question, the physics teacher who had been stunned for a long time finally reacted. He just said, how could Gu Pan be so obedient? If something goes wrong, there must be a demon, so he was waiting here. She's not talking about a topic, she's clearly trying to make trouble. However, Gu Pan didn't feel that he had done something wrong. He blinked and said innocently, Teacher, what are you scolding me for? What am I saying wrong? The physics teacher's sparse pink hair almost exploded, and he stroked his heart from time to time, for fear that he would faint from anger if he didn't take a breath. I asked you to talk, what are you doing? Let's talk about the topic, Gu Pan said in confusion, although I don't usually listen to it in class, I think my imitation ability is pretty good. Isn't that what you usually teach in class? If you don't believe me, ask other students. You don't need to ask, you can hear it from the sullen voice. None of these students are fuel-efficient lamps, especially this Gu Pan. As a member of the Huangfu family, the physics teacher still has a deterrent effect on others. The only thing I can do is look forward to it. Who made her the only darling of the Gu family's generation, and she was so spoiled. When the physics teacher thought of Gu Pan's group of uncles and uncles, he felt that his heart, liver, and lungs ached. No longer bothered with Gu Pan, let her stay where far away, out of sight is pure. Gu Pan returned to his position, and without being polite to the physics teacher, he lay on his side on the sofa, closed his eyes and started to sleep. This move almost made the physics teacher vomit blood again. Of course, Gu Pan didn't really sleep. She went to Zhongxun to borrow books, and she just deliberately created an opportunity to get close to him. She asked the system to show her the learning content of the first year of high school at Sunchia College, except that it was not as difficult as when she was in school, it was normal. Facts have proved that even in the world of Mary Sue, which is famous for its dog blood, it is still impossible to escape the fate of studying for exams. Gu Pan was supposed to be for a day. After school in the afternoon, the luxury private plane that the Gu family used to pick up the young master stopped at the temporary airport where the school was located. Gu Pan couldn't help twitching the corners of his mouth. Seeing is better than seeing it. I thought it was an exaggerated description when I read the novel, but I didn't expect this to happen. Then when she gets home, is there still a 500 square meter bed waiting for her? Congratulations, young master, coming home from school. The voice was so loud that everyone at the school gate looked over at the same time. Gu Pan. Thinking of her personality, she could only barely raise the corners of her mouth to reveal a chaotic smile, and gently said to her classmates, "Then we'll see you tomorrow." After speaking, there was no surprise that there was another scream. After getting on the plane, I looked forward to changing face at the speed of light. Find a place to put me down later. If she had read it right, the few people who followed Zhongxun were the well-known social teenagers of Shengxia. Gu Pan's eyes are slightly cold, what she hates most is school violence.